everybody. Welcome to the last Sandy Says interview. My name is Sandy Demiturgic, and I am the Director of Community Engagement at Schizophrenia and Psychosis Action Alliance. I will be moving on to a new job next Monday. This final interview will be about Minority Mental Health Month held every July. By the way, there are about 30 videos or so you can watch on our YouTube channel hosted by me. I started this back in May 2020, interviewing author Miriam Feldman. I have learned a lot and appreciate all the people who are willing to share their stories and books. Tonight I have a very special guest. Her name is Ashley Smith, and she's an author. I would like to introduce her to you now, and I know Ashley through Bethany Yiser at cures.org. Please introduce yourself, Ashley.
Yes, thank you, Sandy. Thank you very much for this opportunity to share my story and to meet with you. I understand this is a special interview for both of us, this being your last one, and also an interview for me, the first I've had this year. But just to introduce myself again, my name is Ashley Smith. I am an author, an advocate, and a mother. I'm heavily involved in the mental health field, first of all, by my firsthand experience, but also through sharing my recovery story. Yes, so we'll learn more about me in just a moment.
Well, I have read your bio, and you too have accomplished a lot, especially as a writer. What is your success story?
Yes, thank you. Actually, I started sharing my recovery story on my blog. My blog is called Overcoming Schizophrenia. I've been in recovery since 2007, and I've been blogging since 2008. I share a lot of the details about my experiences and what I've learned from living with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. And at first, I was anonymous, and then I overcame a lot of that stigma, and I decided to attach my name to my blog, Overcoming Schizophrenia. Yeah, so my success story is on my blog, and I'm very appreciative of my supporters, my treatment team, and my family in the mental health community.
How has your community helped you thrive even with your illness? What is your community like?
Yes, I've been involved with NAMI Georgia for a very long time. In fact, I'm a former board member, but I didn't start there. I started as a volunteer and became a support group member and facilitator, things like that. But NAMI has done great things in the community and also my life as a whole. It was a part of the foundation of my recovery, along with my family support, and the peer support is crucial. It's helped me so much, as well as my family getting back into holding me accountable, so to say, with their support. And so, yeah, NAMI Georgia has helped me out a lot, especially Cures Foundation. Right now, I'm a part of the advisory council. And so I meet with individuals once a month, and we get to discuss our individual experiences to support our peers and families and caregivers.
That's wonderful. So I too am a peer support specialist. It's been an interesting journey for me. I had a hard time going to support groups. Like NAMI has great support groups and education programs. But because of my paranoia, I had a hard time going to the groups themselves since they were in person. I'm like an anomaly because most people are looking for in-person groups.
Yes.
But with SA groups, the Schizophrenia Alliance groups that we put on at SNPAA, you can call in by phone and participate in the support groups. And that's where, for me, really recovery started back in 2013, when I was able to meet people who had the same diagnosis as I did. Have you ever met anybody who has the same diagnosis as you?
Oh, most definitely, yes. peer support has helped me a lot in my recovery as well. I know that, as you mentioned, you also are a peer specialist.
Mhm,
I am as well here in Georgia. Um, I've been a certified peer specialist for over 10 years now.
mhm,
Um, I'm very excited about sharing my recovery experience with other individuals who have a diagnosis. And
mhm,
also, what is a certified peer specialist? Let me go back. A certified peer specialist is someone who is also living in recovery.
mhm,
That is the criteria that makes you eligible to live experience. But it's not just our recovery experience that we're sharing. We're also providing coping tools. We're we're encouraging individuals um, to stay hopeful,
mhm,
because living with a diagnosis such as schizophrenia or any mental illness can be very challenging, with all the stigma that is engraved in around the world, really.
mhm,
So it's about sharing our story, sharing some coping skills, and keeping people motivated despite the challenges.
mhm. Right. And when I got diagnosed back in 98, I always stayed hopeful no matter how bad it got, even being homeless. And, in 98, I reminded myself of the story of Pandora's box. Have you ever heard of the story where the person's told they're not supposed to open the box up, and they open the box and all these evil things come out, and then they close the box and they hear something saying, "Open up." And they open
No,
it,
I'm not
little
familiar.
fairy comes out, and it was hope.
Mhm.
After all the stuff comes out, you're left with, or you hope you're left with hope. And I think as a peer support specialist, that's so important. We're beacons of hope. And I think for me, I don't know if you experienced it this way, but I found that the peer support training helped me live with my diagnosis. It made me feel more comfortable about talking to others because I got hired at so many different places, but I would leave because I was always worried they would find out.
Mhm.
And I was like, you know what, if I'm going to do the peer support thing, I'm just going to have to come to terms with that and talk about it,
Yeah.
and feeling comfortable in doing advocacy. And as in my job with SMPAA, which I'm going to miss a lot, I've had so many opportunities to be an advocate. Have you done a lot of advocacy work? It sounds like you have through NAMI, Georgia.
Yes, also through I've had the opportunity to work with Janssen Pharmaceuticals Company,
Okay.
and we did a documentary a few years back. It's called Living with Schizophrenia, A Call for Hope and Recovery. It's a non-branded educational film that shares three stories of people living in recovery, as well as our caregivers, things of that sort, and the professionals, the psychiatrists and doctors, and things of that nature. But um, working with NAMI, working with Cures Foundation, working with Janssen has really allowed me to utilize a platform to share my recovery experience and to get to meet a wide variety of individuals who have also been where we've been. And so, not just these groups, but others as well. And so it's been quite a journey. I look forward to doing a lot more work with the community and these groups. And yeah, it's very empowering.
Well, I'm right now reading the book by Dr. Patrick uh, Corrigan about stigma, and
Mhm.
it is about it's I think it's like 32 personal stories of people's experience with stigma having a mental health issue.
Yes.
And I know that for myself, like I mentioned, 2013, finding the essay groups, we use something called the Blue Book. And in the back, starting on page 30, are over 50 personal stories of how essayists help people in their recovery.
Mhm.
And reading those stories challenged me to do more, to live a
Yes.
better life, to hope, to dream. And it made a big difference. And then also for me, a turning point was there's an article in it on recovery. See, I never had heard of the term recovery before
Mhm.
2013, and I've been doing this since 1998. What I heard from my doctors was stability, get stabilized.
Yes.
And I didn't know what that would mean. And once I got diagnosed with schizophrenia in 2008, my doctor, he wanted to control the symptoms, but it was to the point that I was sedated. And my parents went to him and said, "This isn't quality of life. We want more for our daughter." And
Yes.
I'm very fortunate that I have the support system of my family and friends, of course, to push myself harder and to do more. I mean, in fact, it's funny, when I went on disability back in 2008, my first goal was to get off of disability. And
Mhm.
I've worked part-time, a lot of hours. I've done a lot of volunteering, going to graduate school, but it's taken me 15 years to meet that goal, but I did it.
Great.
Do you
That's
have goals
great.
like that you set for yourself?
Goals, yes, I've had a lot of goals. Just give me one moment. I've had a lot of goals to help me stay focused on my recovery. Um, but I think they're forever changing. My definition of recovery is forever changing. For example, I used to think that recovery was staying on medication. I
Mhm.
used to think it was staying out of the hospital. And now I've come to a point that it's not all about that. It's about self-improvement. And what that looks like for me is utilizing my coping tools and not racing to control symptoms all the time, but just trying my best,
Mhm.
recycling my coping skills and trying my best to stay well because uh, it's it's about living life no matter what, no matter what I'm going through with these conditions. And
Mhm.
so now I define recovery as utilizing my coping skills and staying in a good place. And I think that's a huge goal and a huge thing that I focus on is just staying well. And that's a job in itself.
Mhm.
Also, I may have mentioned I'm a mother as well, and that's challenging too. But life is challenging, and we have to do what we can. But we also have to remember that we have others that are here to support us too. And I understand that some individuals may not have much of a support system, but don't lose hope because going to a support group, especially nowadays, everyone doing things online. Um, I really encourage everyone to continue to keep hope alive despite the symptoms, despite the stigma. As we know, we're not alone. It affects a lot of people, but not only does schizophrenia affect a lot of people are in recovery, embracing the life experience. They may not be open to sharing it publicly, but we're all success stories because we got up this morning and we tried. We put on our makeup and whatnot, we put on our clothes, and we try to live our days as best we can.
Yeah, and that really resonates with me. One of the stories, I have two stories that are probably my favorite. One of them is by this person named Larry, and he talked about how he wanted to work full time eventually. Well, he was at the time that he wrote his submission, he was only able to volunteer, but he still had that goal. And that's like the hardest thing. That was the hardest thing for me. My therapist, who I saw for many years after I was first on disability, told me, she said, "Sandy, you have to take baby steps
Yes,
because you can get the job, but can you keep the job?"
yes, yes.
And so, just preparing. In fact, it's interesting with this job starting. I came across this person who is a former special education teacher, and she has started her own business, private business, where she's helping people with social skills and helping adults with disabilities get work.
Mhm.
So I just came across her name on LinkedIn and I reached out to her and I was like, yeah, could you be a guest speaker on my career chat? Because even though I'm not going to be with SNPAA, I'm still doing a support group on Sundays in the career chat monthly job networking group. So, and
Mhm.
then I thought about it some more. I was like, this is perfect timing. So I'm going to be talking to her Friday night to see about what she charges and what she could do for me to help me with the learning curve, because that's where a lot of people really struggle. Did you have struggles with learning curves in new positions, or how did you handle that?
The learning curve, I think that's very important that we talk about that because working with NAMI and my peers, I've learned a whole lot about myself. And I've came across WRAP, the Wellness Recovery Action Plan by
Mhm,
Mary Ellen Copeland. And that's one of the interventions and tools that we utilize as a peer specialist. And so that gives me a whole nother perspective on identifying my triggers,
mhm,
learning what works for me specifically, and what can I do to manage a crisis. And so learning about myself over the years has been it's it's a great way to manage the condition because I've learned about my triggers and my subtle warning signs, which are very subtle.
mhm,
I mentioned that schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. So just for example, when I am texting a few people at one time, a whole book, and I start getting the hand, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm having a manic moment.
mm,
Or my house is my home is a little bit messier than usual. I'm like I'm a little bit off but I can talk to my doctor, I can check
mhm,
in with my family and friends and just work my way through it. So learning about myself and other people, my peers' experience has helped me tremendously.
mhm. Yeah, I did the rap thing too, and I was really impressed with it. And it's also about choices, decisions you make that are yours about
Yeah.
how things will be handled. I think it's very, important to have that in place. Um, yeah, so yeah, with the rap and everything. So,
Wait 1 second, Sandy. I want to go back to the RAP plan because
okay.
if you said it's about decisions and preferences, and
Mm-hmm,
if individuals out there do not recall or know what RAP is, the Wellness Recovery Action Plan by Marianne Copeland, RAP is a crisis management plan. It's almost like a psychiatric advance directive where individuals can discuss their needs, discuss their preferences when it comes to facilities for help or treatment. We can discuss our symptoms, what our triggers are, and things like that, so that once individuals can see some of these experiences going on and these symptoms coming out, we have that support and we have that documentation to let our doctors know, our family know what we're like when we're not well and what we're like when we're well. And talking
mm-hmm,
about crisis management, in fact, I had a crisis this year. Um, Even though I've been in recovery since 2007, I've had a few hospitalizations. This was back in May of 2023. I'm still recuperating, I'm still recovering, but talking about mental illness and schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, I was still on my medication when I was hospitalized.
mm-hmm,
Um, I've been going through a lot of things with my depression, but then changing medications. It's so important to talk to our doctor and our health team about what's going on. Are we taking our medication as prescribed? And what the side effects are? What can we do to manage them? And so while I'm trying different medications, one of these medications triggered my bipolar disorder, my mania, and things like that. And so I'm so glad that me and my therapist were able to talk about some of my symptoms and also being able to get help from my doctor and others. I stayed in the hospital nearly a month and participated in two inpatient programs at the hospital. Um, Again, living with the diagnosis, we have to remember we are not alone. And just because we're hospitalized, it doesn't mean that we're not doing well in our recovery. It's actually a learning experience, like we talked about earlier. We're
Mhm.
learning more about ourselves, what works. We're learning about how to manage because we talk about coping skills in the hospital. It's not just a place where we just sit. It's a place where we learn about our diagnosis and how to take care of ourselves.
Mhm. You know, you bring up so many good points. I wanted to start off with recovery. I think another life-changing moment for me from the Blue Book was the second sentence. I had a hard time, I have had a hard time being on disability because I'm a goal setter. I achieve goals. And when I first got diagnosed, it was like, well, what is my life going to be like? You know, as I mentioned, I was really sedated. But according to the Blue Book, it says perhaps the most obvious sign of recovering is the reduction and control of symptoms to the point of permitting one to have the ability to find and keep steady and structured activity. I love that definition because it's about setting goals. It's about doing something over and over again, having a schedule, having a routine. It doesn't specify because it's different for everybody, but I really appreciate you mentioning, do you like that definition of recovery or?
Well, I'm not here to judge. It's my definition. Excuse me. So sorry. I utilize my dogs as my emotional pets, and it comes in handy. But she's just excited and wants to see her partner. But yes, as we were talking about goals and recovery, my definition of recovery is changing along with my journey. And I'm
Mhm.
looking at recovery in different ways as I go through the stages of learning more about myself and supporting my peers.
Mhm.
Um, and so that definition is good. I agree. I think everyone's definition is valid. And I
Mhm.
think recovery is possible for everyone living with schizophrenia and other conditions as well.
You also mentioned, observing yourself and getting to know yourself better. Have you ever heard of our free app that we offer with health storylines?
No, I haven't. Tell me more about the app.
Yeah, it's a great app. I've been using it for like 5 years or so. You go to either the App Store or Google Play and just type in health and then the two word storylines as one word. And what you can do is it'll remind you when to take your medication. It'll remind you about your appointments. You can track your symptoms. You can journal. So it's all in one place. So when you see your doctor, you can say, here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no
I'm
problem.
so appreciative of your understanding. But yes, um, we're talking about recovery still, right? What were
We
you
were
saying?
talking about the app Health
Yes, yes.
Storylines.
The
Yeah,
app.
wonderful. It's free.
That's awesome. I have not heard of that app, but I definitely want to learn more about it. That's exciting how it gives reminders and lets you journal. I love to journal.
Oh, me too, me too. And I have another question for you. Have you been able to read the new book that NAMI has put out?
No, I haven't. That's great.
I haven't read it either, but it sounds like it's a really good book to read. So, what is your proudest accomplishment?
What are some of my accomplishments?
Your proudest? Which
Oh,
one?
my goddess. Oh my goodness. I'm appreciative of being well today. Like I said, I was just hospitalized a little bit earlier in the year, a couple months ago. But I believe my greatest accomplishment is taking care of my son.
Mm-hmm,
Um, he's given me motivation to really focus on my wellness in order to take care of him. And so I'm also very proud of him because he prays very, very well. And what I mean by that is my spirituality is very important to me.
mm-hmm,
And so when he prays, I'm very proud of him. And I'm glad that I've instilled the importance of God
mm-hmm,
in our home and in him. And
mm-hmm,
so, yeah, I identify as spiritual. And that's one of my coping tools is praise and worship. And
mm-hmm.
so he's one of my greatest, he is my greatest accomplishment and
Mm,
his faith in God.
that's wonderful. So how does it feel being a public speaker about schizophrenia?
I've come a long way and I still have a long way to go. Um, like I mentioned, I started blogging anonymously on my blog, Overcoming Schizophrenia. And that was great because I can be naked and be comfortable in my own skin, and people will reply and be understanding and walk through this place with me. But now I have my name on it, and I've had my name on it for a long time. But it's like I own my recovery. I
Mhm,
own myself, my authenticity, and
mhm,
I'm going to continue to share. I'm going to continue to encourage people to use those coping skills that work for them,
mhm,
because everyone, like we talked about, everyone's recovery definition is different, and
mhm,
everyone's way of connecting with other people and ourselves is going to be different. And so I'm just appreciative of the opportunity to share my story and to have come this far where I feel comfortable sharing my story.
mhm,
It started with the blog, went on to NAMI, and so forth and so forth.
mhm. Were you concerned about stigma you might encounter from the audience or other people?
Most definitely. I'm still overcoming stigma because it's important to understand that we can talk about this or in certain settings. Let me give you an example. When I was hospitalized a few years back, my son was in school and he had some tardies and absences because I wasn't there. I was hospitalized. I had a relative taking care of my son, and it's very challenging.
Mhm,
But I had to justify the tardies and absences, and I showed something from the hospital, but I had to go over it with the black marker, my diagnosis, this, that, and the other, because
wow.
I don't want my son's teacher to think
Mhm,
to look at my child differently because of my diagnosis. He's
mhm,
still a child. He's gonna do goofy things. My
mhm,
son is 11 now. And so the stigma is very real. The stigma is very prevalent worldwide, as we know. There's still myths that people take to heart. One of those myths is that individuals are demonic. And that is so hurtful. That's hurtful because this condition, schizophrenia, it's a medical condition. It requires a lot of attention. It requires just so much. And for people to think that this medical condition is uh, is evil or something like that is just horrible. And as I mentioned, spirituality is very important to me. Um, and it's helped me. My prayers have really helped me stay focused and stay hopeful.
mhm. Yeah, I know spirituality was a game changer for me too, because when I was in college, I was agnostic, and then I however anybody real practices their spirituality, I think it's a good thing. And I think research has really turned around. I think there's two things that have really turned around in treatment of people with our diagnosis. The first one is seeing the benefits of therapy. I
Mhm.
remember back in 2008 when I had my first therapist while I was diagnosed with schizophrenia before it was bipolar. And I had mentioned to my parents DBT and CBT, so my parents found this place where you could do the group therapy and then individual. And the lady who was my therapist, the individual one, she was like, I don't know if this is actually going to help you out. You can try it, it's good. And it's exciting. We're doing our first annual conference for essay members on July 26th. Yeah, and I'm going to be there as the host, even though I'm at another job. And we have Maggie Mullen, who's going to be a speaker, and they wrote the book, The DBT Skills for Psychosis. And recognizing that these skills can be used for psychosis.
Mhm.
I'm a big advocate of doing as much as you can by yourself, but also if you need the medication, you need the medication. So
Yeah, Yes, and talking about medication, I I'm for whatever works for the individual. I take my medication because it helps me control a lot of those symptoms. But I also understand that with the medication, there could be side effects.
Mhm.
And I also understand, like I experienced before, sometimes these medications could trigger other symptoms if not taken properly, or just may not be may not work for me. And so I don't press people about medication. I
Mhm.
say it works for me, but I do encourage people to use whatever coping tools works for them, whether that's medication or other coping styles. uh, I'm very supportive of that and whatever works. And
Right.
so, talking about therapy, I'm very supportive of therapy as well. I mean, I've been in recovery since I was diagnosed, and like you, I've been through some of those programs and classes and therapy sessions. It does wonders to learn more about your strengths, learn more about ways of looking at overcoming these symptoms and stuff like that. For example, my therapist was reminding me of different ways to cope with depression, and she was like, and schizophrenia.
Mhm.
When you take a shower, it's like washing off the depression. That's how she described washing off the depression, because that has been a challenge for me when I was really, really depressed. I mean, these symptoms can even affect physically. I remember I was like, okay, this demands more than just coping skills. I had to talk to my doctor about changing my medication when I felt in pain, and that was depression. And so that was one of my signs that other symptoms can come about later on. And then, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and are you now, do you do any of the support groups as a facilitator with NAMI?
I used to. I have not in a little while. I also am a state trainer for NAMI. Um,
Oh, okay.
yeah, so I do different things.
Yeah, yeah. The reason why I ask is, we were talking about medication and therapy and other things. And, the way we handle it at our essay, the Schizophrenia Alliance groups, is that we let people kind of gloss over what they're taking,
Mhm.
but we always remind everybody that they need to go back to their treatment team, because the last thing I want is for somebody to say, oh, I don't need this anymore, and get off the medication,
Yeah.
or change the medication when a change may not necessarily be needed because they heard about, I mean, you want to get the best medication. I know for me, it was in 2010 that I found the right medication and med combo, because I take a couple, and it just can make such a big difference.
Yes, yes.
And then when you think about, how did you handle the symptom of cognitive decline? Was that
Oh
was
my
that an
gosh.
issue for you? Because I know I was frightened when I first heard it. I was thinking Alzheimer's, I was thinking dementia, I was thinking, because I've always been a pretty smart person. And that's one thing I'm proud about with myself. I mean, I'm not vain about it or anything, but I just, I've always been proud of that fact feature. And the idea that I would lose that was so terrifying. And, here I was setting my goals to return, to full-time work. But I think the medication I'm on helps. I read somewhere it helps with the cognition. There's not that much research out about cognition, but what was your experience?
Yes, I'm being a peer counselor and being in recovery. I've learned that we are all smart about our own diagnosis. We may not know those fancy doctor language, but I think everyone has something to share when it comes to managing these conditions.
Hmm.
Um, I think everyone, as we know, everyone has a story, everyone has a unique experience. Um, because schizophrenia has so many symptoms, everyone could give a piece of wisdom as to how to overcome these symptoms. For example, anxiety.
Hmm.
I'm going through anxiety over the tiniest things, traffic, being late to a meeting, just just anything. I find something to worry about. And so what I've learned to do is to stay busy. I appreciate when I'm home and anxious, I can just do some house chores and stay focused and don't distract me. I'm just concentrating on cleaning. Other things that I do to manage my anxiety is I light a white candle for peace. And it's not that it's unscented, of course, but it's just soothing. It sets the tone for me. And I do a little bit of meditation. I just keep it on the back, and I'm not really doing the whole yoga thing, but
Mhm.
listening to the waves, it's soothing to me. And I experience anxiety quite often over the little things. These are just different things that people may do. House chores, walking. What coping skills do you utilize?
I like to read. Reading, if I can, and I like Danielle Steele books because they're easy reads. You just for me, and I'm able to get into the story, get into the plot, get out of my head, and so that's a big one. I used to run. I actually did one 5K, which I'm proud of. But I like to walk a lot. I like to hike. There's a nature trail here in Lafayette that I like to go to on a regular basis. And spending time with my family. I'm fortunate. I'm in Lafayette in Louisiana, and I've got my sister and brother and parents within 20 minutes of each other. So we're very close. So I'm very fortunate that way.
Yes, yes. I understand completely that family support, it can go a long way. And it's not just family support, everybody. Being a parent, I've worked with of course my peers, but neighbors, things like that. Just utilize your whole support system. Um, and so that's helped me in the long run as well. And I love that you like nature and running and things. I do a lot of walking. I love uh I love just the scenery. It's
Mhm.
soothing, seeing all the greenery and things like that in the park. And so I do that as well. I try to make it a part of my routine.
I remember when I first really started this journey back in '98, I had a counselor and she told me, and it really changed. I saw the difference that CBT could make. It was called ANTS, automatic negative thoughts. And what you do is you write down your negative thought, then you say why it's not true, and then you replace it with a positive thought.
I love that. I have not heard of that, but I love it.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
gonna try that like now. While you talked about writing and journaling, things like that, I do something called a realistic journal. I learned about this from an old employer. One of my supervisors said, write down things that you've accomplished. And I think that's great for those of us who have depression because the depression, as you know, it can come with shame, guilt, anger, just the whole thing, all this negativity, negative self-talk. And we all have it. I know I have for one. And writing down, hey, my medication, hey, I did this, I did that. And so that helps me stay accountable to me and it helps me feel good. It's a self-esteem booster for me, the
Yeah.
realistic journey.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Ashley, for sharing your success story and how you thrive with schizophrenia. Do you have any additional comments?
Yes, yes. I encourage everybody to check out my blog, Overcoming Schizophrenia. Also to check out my books on Amazon. I have written 5 books. And so another thing is, for those of us that are living with this condition, again, you're not alone. Recovery is possible, and just keep on working your plan, whatever those coping tools that work for you, because recovery is possible and it's unique for everybody. I thank you again, Sandy, for allowing me to share my story. I appreciate your time in our interview, and I wish you on a new job. That's exciting. Congrats.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for watching this Sandy Says video. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next video, although it won't be Sandy Says. Have a great evening. Bye, everybody.